So I'll go first. Hey, I'm John Michael Reefer. I'm here with my man Marquis, and we're creatives, we're filmmakers, storytellers, and we're Black men living in America, and we're trying to figure out, where and how we fit in to whatever is coming next. There was an election this November, last November, and everything's changed. Everything's changed. And in that conversation, and as I was talking to Marquis about this, it seemed to me that what everyone is not focused on clearly is beyond the rule of law. What is the value of the Constitution? I mean, a number of things that the administration is being accused of is either in direct contradiction to the Constitution or just plain simple illegal. And I feel like the the left, the pundits, the political class, and even the electorate is getting bogged down in the minutia of what he's doing, what the administration's doing, and not clearly drawing the line. Like, are we doing a constitutional government or not? Because if we're not, then we should all simply acknowledge that and pick our camps that we'll be interned in, so we could all just start whatever this transition is smoothly.
All right, and John, I love that take on it, and I love how you're starting us off in that mode. But I'm also going to put the disclaimer out that we are not advocating for anarchy. I'm going to make that clear.
I don't think anarchy is available in this modern society at present. Uh, the, the the
I
kind of
agree.
the kind of coalition needed to have effective anarchy, I don't know. I don't know how or who could build it.
True, true. Plus, too many people are playing video games and doing all kind of lazy activities anyway. So that's a good thing in some sense. But back to I'm Marquis Smalls, and I'm happy to be here to be able to try to um, give some understanding of this document that pretty much rules our lives here in America. And um, as a historian, a history teacher, history major in college as well, I feel like it's time for me to dig in to what this document means. And as John said, what is the value of it? What is the value of the Constitution that people are not actually going to follow it? Also, what you just made me also think of, John, too, is who is there to enforce it if the executive branch chooses to defy it? Like, will it be the Congress, which, again, as we know, is currently aligned with him through party politics and refusing to, maintain their own power and checks and balances that they're granted in the document? And then you also have the judiciary, who, is, sometimes threatening to hold the administration in contempt. But what exactly does that mean? Like, who would pay that fine or who would serve that jail time um, if they were to actually say that, there was a line crossed too far and they had to dole out consequences to somebody? Would the administration get to pick who serves that term or pays that fine, or would they just blanketly ignore that too? And so we're in a very interesting time period as far as, assessing the value of this document and what it means to all of us as American citizens, because that, above all else, is where we need to really start to coalesce and come together as a nation. And that, are we like, what's our America for the 21st century and beyond look like? Like, not what the America of the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and even the 2000s, the early 2000s look like up to Y2K. I mean, like we have a post-COVID world that we are dealing with, in that we need to really define and help shape what this country is going to look like from here on out. And some of it is already coming from the administration currently. But that's exactly why we're here, though, to dissect this document and help people, get a better understanding of it, because there are going to be moments where you're going to need to know what's in here in order to understand what's happening in our nation.
Yeah, absolutely. At present, I think uh, the line for Congress is if it is not actual treason, it is abdication. Even if Congress, even if this current Congress is aligned with the administration's agenda, um, the path that they're choosing to execute that um, is beyond uh, just uh, just unbelievably just leaving the administration to roam the field as they see fit is an abdication of their responsibility.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, for sure.
I think part of what we what we understand better is what they want to do. They're the only ones that want to do it. So if the agenda that they were moving forward was in fact popular, then they would go through the normal uh, process of passing legislation to solidify and enact the changes they want to make in the society. They're not able to do that because what they want to do uh, does not benefit the American electorate. So I think we have to really think about an American electorate that doesn't understand what rights it actually has, um, and deal with the people who understand what this is and don't care. Um, the Constitution provides a balance between the Congress, the judiciary, and the executive branch. So no one of those branches is superior than the other. It's co-equal branches. And one of the main reasons the Constitution was set up is to avoid what was the monarchy. One person in charge making the rules with no no opportunity for recompense or justice for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. I tell my students all the time. I'm like, this document was in this country was created because no one wanted a king. Like that was the whole thing. Like it was the no king land. It was the
Yeah,
land of freedom because of that, and that there was no
yeah,
king that was ever supposed to rule over this land. And we
yeah.
currently have one who is trying their best to
Well,
make that
I think
reality.
the current president is trying to rule like a dictator autocrat, um, and skirt the law wherever he can. I do think what bears noting for people to understand is the Constitution wasn't designed to protect all of us in its inception. And I think we have to begin to look at that as
Yeah,
we
well,
look at how
even
it works.
people that look like us and were of African descent were excluded. Remember, and even in the initial, when they finally put us into it, they only included us as three-fifths of a person.
Right. So the initial protections were for people who, white males that owned land. Those
Yeah.
are the people, it was really designed to protect that class.
Hmm.
So if you didn't own land, if you weren't a man, and if you weren't white, it was not designed to protect you. It was designed to protect it was designed to protect the people above you with uh, with the incentive that, maybe at some point you could be one of those people so you could feel protected. Um, we are we're way past that now. And I think the other thing that has to be noted is, America's bounty is on the backs of slaves and the indigenous people. Um, and we got to remember that every single time they've moved forward, uh, they've they've figured out a way to have just enough room to push you back, just enough room to push you back.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it is always
so
a backlash.
always the backlash. So I think we have to really think about how we protect as a citizenry, how we protect the Constitution. And I think the first way to protect it is to understand what it is. And as we continue this conversation, I think we'll find a much larger part of the electorate is unfamiliar with what the document represents and what the document actually contains.
Well, with that said, I'm gonna dig right into where it came from, and the anniversary for it is coming up. The actual date that's referenced for when the document was being formulated is May 25th, and and with today being May 21st, I believe, right?
Right,
No, second. Today's May 22nd. So we're very close to that anniversary of May 25th, where, the document itself was created to become a stronger governmental system above the Articles of Confederation, which were first enacted by the First Continental Congress.
right.
Um, and then in 1787, they commissioned the Second Continental Congress, led by a financier named Robert Morris, whose name some people will be familiar with. Some people may or may not know that name. But, was backed financially by, as you said, a white man with money. And people got together, or other white men with money got together and decided to create this document that would create three co-equal branches of government called the United States Constitution. And the purpose of it, I'm going to read to you what the first paragraph of it says. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And so, with those words in mind, it just makes me think of, first off, the people are referenced more so, and this even goes to a most recent argument about the secretary that just got called out for not knowing what habeas corpus was and giving that right to the president, um, and not even understanding that the Constitution is by and for the people, whether even those people did not necessarily have the power to be in that room or the land ownership to be in that room and to create the final document. The sentiment of the people in that room was, as it distinctly and eloquently says, the general welfare. So, yes, like back to your point, John, about how even though those rich white men did not necessarily, um, they did not seek to eliminate others from the powers that are invested in this document. And they said it explicitly in the very first paragraph, the general welfare and our posterity, which again means, their extended families, their extended groups, their extended work relationships, their extended trade partners, So, all of those things are things that we need to understand about this document, um, that is now being challenged in such ways and creating such a crisis that we're experiencing with this administration, because clearly their goal is to either redefine it or to circumvent it so that they can then usurp more and more power to then
Or to
control
get
the
rid of it,
response. Say it again.
or to get rid of it. I mean, I
Well,
think
yeah,
that
yeah, and but again, like when you think about it, that that to me is the most extreme potential um, outcome. In that, in order to get rid of it, it would take an act of Congress.
I don't think so. I think we're
Think
pushing.
they could just rip it up?
I think that that's well, many of the people listening to this may be aware. Uh, there are a number of what are referred to as technocrats,
Hmm.
Peter Thiel, Jeffrey Sachs, Elon Musk. Uh, their position is the Constitution and democracy in and of itself have outlived its usefulness.
To them,
Uh, to them, but they
right?
are
To
they
them,
are at this those those people are at the right hand of power. So it's not unfathomable for them to encourage ways to sink the ship or push the baby off the cliff, which is
yeah,
what they're trying to do.
yeah, and I agree with that. element of it in that knowing, and again, as a historian, knowing that there has been no great civilization that has not imploded. There really
After
has,
250 years is what everyone says.
yeah, what I mean? Like there really hasn't been a civilization. It's always been from within that a civilization dies, right? So, yes, if these autocrats who think that they now know better because they have accumulated so much wealth, and like it just what you just made me think of is there were rich people who were not allowed in that room to
Right.
create this document, and to me, those autocrats that you just mentioned that would want to get rid of it would be those people who were left on the outside looking in. And part of that is the threat of what America provides is that you're given the freedom to pursue whatever interests you like to pursue, especially if you have the means or the resources to pursue those interests. And then yes, you can become Dr. Evil and you can become the person that wants to destroy everything because it's something you want to control, and you potentially may want to be that king-like figure, or you may want to be that oligarchy of a group of people who control everything. And to me, that's partially human nature, which is why, again, I always feel like in our existence of humanity, it's been proven time and time again that whenever those types of people seek to control the situation, the the level of opposition to that control, or even just the people who are close enough to them to put a stop to it, always step up and do what's right, which is again how we got here in the first place. Like we're not even to this point of being so privileged as Americans that we can even now debate whether or not our Constitution is valuable or not, because we do have a tax on it. That alone comes from the advancement of civilization being to the point where we're in the greatest global environment that we've ever been. Communication is at the highest it's ever been. Interactions among people throughout the world, whether locally or globally, is greater than it's ever been. And so, in some respects, I feel like sometimes people just come out with their own agendas, which try to make themselves feel more important than they really are. And this attack on the Constitution itself, and this attack on our country, and the unnecessary changes that are happening that are totally dismantling institutions and destroying people's lives, whether it be immigrants, which again, this country was built on as well. Um, we really have to help people understand how to use this document to help put an end to that.
Well, so I want to push back on two ideas. I think at this moment for me, human nature is not evil. I think we have been acculturated to this idea that the most base nature of our existence is acceptable. I I don't know if I agree with that. I think we've been propagandized to think that people behaving badly is a part of the system, and I think people behaving badly is the anomaly. The human condition, as an individual person, I've had an incredible experience to travel and meet people in many different cultures around the world. And I personally have been assisted and aided in the darkest hours of the morning or the evening. People who did not speak my language, people who did not understand my culture, um, extended their humanity to me when I needed it. So many times,
Yeah,
countless times.
yeah,
So
I
I
agree with
don't know if I want to normalize the kind of vitriol um, and contempt for humanity that's being exhibited. And the other thing I want the audience to think about in that preamble to the Constitution, it talks about established justice to ensure domestic tranquility. I want us to really think hard about justice for whom, and tranquility, in my mind, is the status quo. So as just make sure The apple carts don't get turned over, and that's okay. So if a couple of people starve because all the apples stayed on the cart, that's fine. The apples made it to market, and that's what's important. And I think we have to better define what justice represents. Um, so if in fact the Constitution is a living, breathing document as we want it to be, and not the the constitutionalists who are picking apart the apostrophes and the consonants and the vowels, um, what represents justice? I think so. As people read the Constitution and examine it and how it impacts their lives, I think we should begin to really look at what justice represents and what tranquility is. Tranquility is the status quo, and if you apply that to this moment, then people should not be demonstrating, and whatever the government is doing, uh, the government is saying it's justice, so we should accept it. And I think we have to really interrogate uh, the theory that uh, justice as it was established um, was not for everyone, and I think we have to we have to always consider um, shaking the cart.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know if turning the cart over is the best solution in this moment, but if not stopping the cart, holding the cart and shaking the cart, if we're not capable or willing or able to do any of those things, I think um, we run the risk of finding ourselves so far behind that there won't be any options uh, as we go forward into the future.
well, yeah, I think that could definitely be one pathway that could emerge from it. Um, but building off that whole notion of, you know, j does justice work for everyone? I would say that, we're still in that um, ever developing time frame of justice still being sought for everyone, and just of how we still have to deal with um, police killings, or even um, certain people being persecuted and snatched off the street by ICE, like um, some even being American citizens.
Well,
And so,
I think if you take the example of the abductions, the abductions in and of themselves are not outside the purview of the law. What's outside the purview of the Constitution is what we talked about, habeas corpus. What also is confusing to so many Americans at present is due process. Uh, should the government consider you a threat to public safety? We have granted the government permission to act on that on our behalf. I think the question is, if someone is identified as not being in this country under the rules established prior at this time, then that person needs to have due process to explain their position, to possibly seek asylum, uh, and if we're not letting the entire process play out, then I think we're really at a crossroads because detaining people based on the threat of public safety, even if it is a trumped up, no pun intended, farcical, even if that's the case, without due process, that's the problem. I think the the tactics that this particular administration is using call into question its legitimacy for what it wants to achieve. Because I think if in fact ICE agents are deputized and sworn to uphold the laws, then they should be able to execute those without this level of secrecy that they've been perpetrating with thus far. Um,
but I think that that's the insidious nature of it, in that they know that what they're doing is illegal, And so that's why it's got to be done in secret, or it's got to be done in pop-up ways where, their intentions can't be known ahead of time, because they know that what they're doing is illegal. Like you really, in the United States, there should never be a time anyone can just get snatched off the street without any recourse available to them, much
Correct.
less transported to a whole other country without any recourse. And that
Right.
again is what habeas corpus is built into the law to
That's
provide
correct.
that due process, right? So they know what they're doing is illegal, and that's again one of the tactics to challenge this document. And again, going back to maybe your point about destroying the Constitution, is how they experiment with the destruction of it to see just how far they can get away with it, just how much they can get away with without any consequences. And so that is where we do have to dig into exactly that notion of justice and domestic tranquility. And one thing I want to expand on the tranquility aspect of it, I do believe it goes further than status quo in that tranquility is time dependent. It's dependent on the time period you're living in. Like tranquility for the time period they created this document and the lifestyle that they were living is totally different than the tranquility we currently exist upon now. So it's a malleable concept in which it evolves with the time period that you're currently in. Whatever the access you have to communication, to travel, to be able to move around, to be able to create um, wealth, or even to create knowledge, all of those things lend itself to the tranquility that people are actually being able to experience. And so it's partially why I like the word in the sense of it does allow itself to be shaped by the time period it is currently being experienced in. And so I do agree that in some sense it may give the establishment or the people who were in that room the feeling of, yeah, we're just going to keep our situation, the same, and we're going to make sure we stay on top. For some, it may feel like that, but for me, it also provides for what gave even us as African Americans, or even immigrants, or even other cultures that have come to this country, or even the indigenous people who have figured out how to, in some ways, survive all of the atrocities that they've been put through to still be here and be making an impact um, on the world. Like that's the contribution to the tranquility that cultures and people, bring with it. And so, we need to understand and define what that is going to look like for the future. Like what does tranquility look like for now? Like
I think
I know we're not there.
I think tranquility in as we go forward in this in this new time post COVID, I think tranquility is a level of equanimity where the least amount of people are left behind. And I
Mhm.
think if we don't begin to work toward that, uh, then I think we're in trouble because Anthony Scaramucci, a one-time favorite of the administration, has said on several occasions, what he doesn't want is to live in a gated community where he has to isolate himself and his family from everyone else.
Right.
And sometimes I wonder the level of hubris of the oligarchs, the billionaires, and the corporatists. Uh, it's unfathomable to me how they don't see they can't they can't arrest they cannot kill all of us. They cannot arrest all of us, and they can't fire all of us.
Right.
And that doesn't seem to be. No one is at the meeting raising that as an issue. You can't fire them all. You can't kill them all, and you can't put them all in jail. And
Right.
they're they seem to be missing that point as we move into the generation of AI. The stated goal of many of the people promoting AI is that the labor force will be eliminated. And if you if you look at it as a society where nobody is able to earn a rate. No one's able to earn a living wage. Uh, I don't know what does that look like for the person that does, for some happenstance of luck, own a Rolls Royce. Where do you get to drive your Rolls Royce if everywhere you go, people don't have? I mean,
Yeah, like
where do
where
you,
can you go to enjoy yourself if there's people around the world in every country in every place starving, right?
right,
Like where like so again, I think that that's partially driving the whole notion of wanting to go to space, because they realize that they know it. They know that that notion of tranquility on Earth is unattainable if they continue to hoard all the resources and all the wealth.
right. But if that's accurate, then there's a level of delusion that we need to address. They're not going to space. They're not ever
But you can't tell them that.
right. But so theoretically, if 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 you're under the delusion that you're going to escape the carnage you wrought,
Right.
and in reality you're never going to escape it, I think that everyone else needs to really interrogate that delusion, because we cannot have a democracy where we're at the whims of any particular person. We
Or
cannot have a
party.
democracy where we're at the whims of any particular theocracy. Um, we cannot have a democracy where people are actively looking to harm other humans in large scale. So if in fact we are going to remain in terms of the United States, a country where people have an opportunity to make a better life for themselves, uh, and have their children have a better life than them, then we have to interrogate how we're going to allow the people with what is referred to as wealth in this country, how we're going to allow them to circumvent the rules that we're all held accountable by. Because if we're not going to do that, you know, we're going to see ourselves, um, and to be topical, at present, Sean Combs is on trial for a number of really heinous things, and mostly it seems because of his wealth, uh, he a blind eye was turned toward him, and for all the things that he did. So it's not even it's a broader scope than race. It is an argument of class, and if Class A and Class B have to follow all the rules, and Class C doesn't have to even bother with the rules, I think we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult, intractable situation.
Well, the one good thing I could say is that at least Sean is getting due process and he's getting
He's
his
getting he's
in
getting
court.
due process, but a number of people have pointed out he was held without bail for a much longer period of time. He was deemed to be a threat to public safety and a flight risk. Um, I'm not confident both of those things were accurate.
Well,
So
yeah, yeah. I think again, like
it's
the
very
system.
possible
One
he
thing we
really
know is the system can be weaponized against any one of us, right? And that really doesn't matter around your level of wealth or your level of celebrity, or even if you're just, and we also know that there's been communities, like even going back to the stop and frisk days in New York, that have been disparaged by the weaponization of the criminal justice system. Um, so again, that's part of what goes back into understanding this document, in that it's established so that it looks at what levels of justice are available for the citizens of this nation. And we clearly are not there in any way, shape, or form, or even close to
we are not
fulfilling
there.
the idea of it. So that's part of why, the activist community and why people who are standing tall and firm on making sure that these challenges, these court cases, and whatever side of the fence of it you're on, you know, the fact that we still can engage in these debates is what is one of the great things about this nation. and that
Absolutely. I think I'm excited about the people who are fighting. I think as our conversation continues, hopefully we'll get to speak to some of those people
yeah.
uh, because I think people need to know all is not lost. Um, the road ahead is narrow and treacherous. I think we can make it, but I think we're the it's really, really we're getting close to the tipping point of the edge where you know my opinion is that the current administration is trying to break the government so that even if it continues to exist, it won't function in a way that's helpful to the electorate. It'll simply be helpful to them. And even using the Constitution, that may become ineffective if the system is so broken that you have no recourse for quote unquote justice.
Well, that's where I want to segue right now, us into the second point that you brought up in your note that you wanted to discuss, which is what's in the Constitution, right? And so we're not going to get into every facet of it because there are a bunch of articles and a bunch of amendments that we're going to eventually go through
Absolutely.
visually throughout this whole show over other episodes. But the one part I do want to bring up beyond the preamble for this particular episode is the fact that um, the Constitution is broken into articles, right? And so
That's
the
right.
very first article of the Constitution, and the way it's broken down for anybody who's never seen it in its entirety, is that the very first article, right? You would think that the way that our government is currently running, that the first article would have spoke to the executive branch and
Mm,
provided that power or description or understanding of what the executive branch um, should be. But if you read the Constitution, you'll learn that the first article speaks to Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives, right? So just think about that for a second. The founders of this nation did not, and again, mainly because they definitely knew they never wanted a king, right?
that's right.
They started with the first article of the document giving again power to the people because it's the people that vote their congresspeople in, and they made sure that when they put this on record that it was going to be done every 2 years to limit the power of even those who they would grant the initial um, powers
Authority.
to as the first branch.
Yeah. So I mean, as you start out with the Congress, uh, I find, it's an unsettling statistic. Many people are not aware of who their senator is or who their congressperson is.
Exactly, and
Uh,
that's where we're as a community falling short.
you know, I think, in this modern time, it's really difficult to process all the information. It's really important information, but it's hard to process. So the Congress and the Senate meet. Uh, they decide on legislation based on the administration's agenda or particular issues in the culture or society, and they craft legislation for the president to sign into law. That
Or
process,
veto. Don't forget the president can also veto.
the president can veto. Absolutely, he's got the power of the veto. But I think if people had a greater understanding that they should be they should find a way to be better engaged with their congressmen and senators for federal legislation that protects their interests, I think we wouldn't be as deep in a hole as we are now. People need to understand what the legislation is. They need to understand who it impacts, who benefits from it, and who is hurt by it.
So
Uh,
let me broaden your point on that real quickly because I think what you just touched on is the key element of what we're experiencing right now. And this is where the MAGA movement, in my opinion, has even kind of usurped the country for this last election. And that I feel like just exactly what you're saying. The average American citizen and particularly possibly even ones that lean more liberal, more democratic, don't necessarily engage with their Congress people specifically, especially in their districts, as well as their senators, as much as say currently the MAGA movement is doing with their senators and with their Congress people, in that that's what makes them feel so emboldened and so empowered, and particularly, our current president
Well,
as leader of that.
I would respond by saying that I mean statistically one of the issues that we face is the Republican uh, not the Republican, the center of the country. So if you go west from New York and you go east from California, a lot of those districts are bulletproof, and a number of those Republican districts are so bulletproof that it doesn't matter. And as a result of that, almost anybody can have those jobs. And if you're in alignment with the agenda, you can keep that job. And we I think our audience will be very familiar with uh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, um, someone like Matt Gaetz. Uh, uh, oh man, there's a number of Republicans who are in incredibly safe districts,
Oh yeah, yeah, no, no,
and because they're in the districts that are so safe, they can be the wing on the wing nut, and they there's no consequence to that. So
yeah,
I think people the electorate I don't think there's a I think the electorate needs to understand that principle. So I mean one of the things that I've been talking to friends about, you know, first of all, at the local level, wherever you are, uh, you should know, uh, you should be in communication with the mayor of your city, the governor of your state, your legislature, your assembly person. You should be in communication with them, holding them accountable every day because they directly impact your life. Because those people are the people who make that's the farm team, and that farm team is what becomes the congressman, the senator, and also then becomes the president. And I think if the power is vested in Congress, then the American people should be much more vigilant about what Congress is doing, why it's doing it, and again, who benefits from it, and who's impacted negatively. And without that uh, without the right kind of engagement, we end up with a Congress that is unresponsive. We don't have any reasonable legislation around guns in this country because the Congress is unresponsive to the American electorate. Uh, we don't have any substantive legislation around health policy because the Congress is unresponsive to the electorate. Um,
yeah. And I think that that's why these next 2026 midterms are so important. And hopefully, people engaging in this podcast and learning more about this document will help people understand the importance of engaging with these House of Representatives members and their senators. Um, because again, like the document clearly lays it out, the first branch that is granted and also granted the power to purse, granted the power to invest, the power to tax is the Congress. And so we need to get out of that notion of, however, I don't even know how it ever got to the point of the president becoming, you know, just in popularity alone, the person that we as a nation look to as the person who can change our lives.
well, I think some of it is the idea that some of it is American exceptionalism. So the concept that America is beyond anything else, and then the thing that is often said amongst people, quote unquote, the most powerful person in the world is the president of the United States. And I think
But is that
the
factual or is that a propaganda tool?
that's a propaganda tool because the real role of the president of the United States is to do the bidding of the electorate. The-
Right.
He presents the whoever's running for president presents a specific kind of agenda he thinks is important, or she, and the electorate that believes in that agenda supports them, and they win the election. Once they win the election, their responsibility is to do their best to work with Congress to meet that agenda out. I think I think what we're failing at, and this is going to be a really interesting test. When you run for president, what you should be doing is you should be saying you have to make three votes. You vote for me, you vote for a senator, and you vote for a congressman that supports my agenda. I think
Mhm.
the Democrats in particular have been sheepish to say that because they don't want to get painted um, as having too much power and too much control. So now that we see what that looks like, which is the president has the support of the Congress and the support of the Senate, and instead of working with him to move the agenda forward, they've all decided to lay down and just let him just ride around all over the golf course by himself.
Right.
Uh, so we'll see if the Democrats can come to a strategy to say, listen, we can use their formula but do it better, and can they find an articulate message to do that? Because the Congress can and should work with the president and the administration, but they should work within the laws of the country under the Constitution to enact their agenda. And at present, the current administration is suggesting the laws are too cumbersome for our agenda, so we should really just get rid of them.
Oh yeah, that's their agenda. And so um part of the fight back against that is to decide how to best challenge that notion and that this new order that they're trying to implement to whose benefit, and that's where holding them accountable in the 2026 elections, and it's going to be a historic moment either way. Whether
I don't
it
know
turns
if
out,
it's I'm not convinced yet that the midterms are going to be the panacea that we're people are suggesting. Because I think for me, in this moment, what is important to understand is will is there a place for the media, the news, to really ask the electorate the real question based on everything that we've experienced in these last 100 and some odd days. Do you do does the electorate believe we should just do away with the Constitution? Just, you know what? Never mind. Because I don't think people are being, I think, because that's the question people need to be asked.
well, yeah, they do,
Do
but
you
at the same time, it's
believe?
also a question that the media is not going to ever ask that question because the media is corporate control right now. And so unless you're talking about independent journalists who are going to actually challenge that, like that's not coming from corporate led media. That's not coming from any of our
Right, but if it's not
outlets that
coming,
we that we know.
if it's not coming from them, if in fact the Constitution is under threat and the media is not capable of analyzing that threat and really,
Mainstream media. I would again say that there are media members who are challenging these notions. It's just that they're not part of the mainstream media that gets the most publication, or they're not part of, the names that we would know as far as being what we would call media. And again, most of those media sources are also very much white supremacist led and also very much have their own agenda for why they would even want to see the drama play out um, through a Trump presidency, or in their minds think that this is what's good business for them as far as how they're going about their media pursuits and why they're choosing to consistently focus on the negative and not highlight a lot of the great things that are actually happening in communities today. Like there's a lot of great stuff
I
going.
mean, I know people are always doing great things. So I want to plant my flag and say, once you understand once our listeners understand what is in this Constitution, I think the referendum is, do you still want this? I mean,
Yeah, I
based on
think that's a good
whatever
question
those
to ask. That
individual
that is a good question to ask.
based on the individual agendas that people are interested in, do you think the Constitution has had its time and maybe we should do something else? Um,
Well, but that's the thing too. I don't think that that's quite possible in America because if you do something else, that means that you're no longer America.
yeah, but the America that the transformation people are seeking is something else. And
But
I
who? What
I
people are
think
you talking about? Are you talking about the average citizen seeking something else?
yes, because I think the issue that here's the thing. This country is based on segregation and racism and slavery and all those isms. And that has been working for a large enough part of this electorate and population that those issues have not been resolved or eliminated. So given that fact, maybe there's enough people who want something else. And I think that if we don't figure out a way to make that a clear, pointed question, so if in fact we have to fight them, we know who them is. And that's not good English, but I know. But because that's who we're fighting right now, and we're not fighting it effectively. The MAGA movement, the people who are supporting this current administration, supported this administration into public office, knowing that this person is poorly equipped to manage anything. But what they really wanted, they wanted an authoritarian. Um, they wanted someone who would hurt the people that they don't like, the people they feel threatened by, um, the systems they feel threatened by. And they said, this guy will do it. So they presented, of all the choices, they chose him. Those people don't want democracy. They don't want this. They
Well,
don't want
well,
democracy.
I
So
think
the question
you
is,
can make that argument on their behalf, and
they don't want democracy because if they wanted democracy, they would say, we want someone to fix these things, whatever those things are. They don't want someone to fix things. They want someone to break things. So if you want this thing broken, you don't want democracy. If you want it reformed, if you want it changed, if you want it improved, you want democracy. If you want someone to break this, you don't want democracy. And I think we have to interrogate those people because if what they want is something else, then we need to make them realize it and say it out loud. Because if we continue to obfuscate MAGA as simply right wing, as simply conservative, as simply far right wing, I think we lose any ground we have. They want the people, they want the immigrants out of this country, and they don't want the immigrants to come in.
except
Immigrants for
for
the
Afrikaners,
capital.
they do want Afrikaners. Let's not.
But they want, but here's the thing about that particular incident: the Afrikaners don't want to come here. The Afrikaners' right-wing agenda is something totally different. This is this is a ham-handed, poor, poorly executed attempt by the administration to do something racist. That's all it is. But I'm
Well,
saying
again,
to you,
I think that's the low hanging fruit of what this country is built upon. Yes, I agree with you in that sentiment. Um, but I also feel like that's why this document and the way it was set up, with it being term limits as far as like how many years a person can actually hold that office, and the intentionality of it is for there's always going to be cycles that we go through as a country, and this would not be the first time we've had
right,
a
but I'm saying to you, a cycle is people uh, people want to lower taxes. That's cyclical. Uh,
Well, no, segregation was a cycle.
but I'm saying the MAGA movement,
Yeah,
the
which
core,
comes out of that root.
the root of the MAGA movement is racism.
Yes.
And in the vitriol of that racism, they what they're really mad about is that the rules were too even that would allow for a black person to be in charge. That's what they're mad about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
I think we all know
because
that.
right, but I'm saying to you that's why I'm saying that we have to make a decision to confront people who don't want democracy because they're mad that the way the rules were set up, it was their impression that the hurdle was so high that there would never be any way for anybody to climb, not even climb the fence. There'd be no way to get to the fence.
Right.
That's what they believed.
But isn't that the reason why we're here and why the Constitution itself is under attack? Is because of just what you just said. Is
Right.
that
So those
the
people,
document that was working for them for hundreds of years is now
exactly.
currently in their minds not working anymore for them
Right.
because
And
there are
they
people who
wanted
have the power to enact it and make it be what it is for the entire general welfare.
right. And I'm
Right.
saying
So we're
that
on the cusp. So
the
let's look at it from that point. We're on the cusp of potentially meeting the ideals and the dreams of what this document was intended to do. But we have a segment of our population in this country who, because they feel like they're being disenfranchised by this same document that has
they are but they
overwhelmingly
are being
franchised them.
they are being disenfranchised. That's not a feeling. They are being disenfranchised.
Right.
The core of the MAGA are disenfranchised middle class workers and middle class people who
And wealthy.
so much.
And wealthy who don't have a lot of friends anymore.
But I think that the core of this is the capacity for competition that was never there is was completely illustrated by Barack Obama's win of presidency.
Yeah.
Up until that moment, it, the the thought of someone competing against you that was in fact qualified was negligible because you know what? Your cousin, your uncle, your brother, your mother, your sister was going to give you the job anyway.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
I'm saying that if in fact we can get people to acknowledge they want this to be done away with, then we know who we're fighting because I think if we're not careful, we're going to be up against those people playing politics, and they're not playing politics. Elon
Or,
Musk, I mean, Elon Musk is quoted as saying very recently, or he retweeted someone's post about the elimination of the copyright laws.
yeah.
So if you want to eliminate the protections for the culture, you don't want democracy.
Well, yeah. And again, Elon Musk, that's why I don't pay him much
But
mind anyway,
but
because Elon Musk
many
to me is not
people,
an American. You know, like,
yeah, but the Elon Musk, Sam Altman, uh, the entire AI cohort are using the MAGA movement to manipulate to their own agendas. And
yeah,
again, a lot of those agendas are autocratic, fascist, or dictatorial. And I think again, if we're not able to interrogate that for what it is, uh, we run the risk of having this silly loop conversation with people about stuff that doesn't matter.
well,
Because
yeah, that's for sure.
either you want everyone to have a fair opportunity, you want to win, but you're willing to join the race, or you want to blow up the stadium.
Well, yeah, you know,
And
and
I think if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves running in the race against someone who wants to blow up the stadium, and we're all going to get shrapnel, is what I'm suggesting.
yeah, I feel you. I feel you. That is definitely one potential outcome of it all. And I do also believe that the race itself the ultimate goal for the race itself is for the race and the rules of the race to be formulated by a committee of people who want quality and fairness in that race, right?
That's
For everybody,
correct.
right? That's the ultimate goal, right? And so I do feel like the evolution of this nation has gotten us to that point where everybody's in the room now, right? Some voices are still maybe not as strong as they need to be, or maybe not as even strong as they're allowed to be. But at this point, all voices are in the room.
I don't.
And
I wouldn't say all voices in the room. I think what I would say more clearly is every single person knows what's at stake and has got to figure out how they are going to uh, play, how they the whatever card they have, how they're going to play that card. Everybody's not in the room because even if you look at
that's what I'm saying, John. Like we all know everybody ain't good at playing cards.
right, no, but even if you're not good at playing cards, we have to take into consideration even if you look at the Democratic Party, they selected someone, they appointed someone to run against the current administration. That process was flawed, um, so everybody wasn't in the room. So I think the question of the culture of America and society is if we all know what's at stake, then I think everyone will have an opportunity to play their card to win the game. Um, Everybody's not in the room. The politics of America are circumscribed to the rich, the powerful, and the elite, and mostly they've done little harm. This current administration seems uh, focused on doing as much harm as possible, and that's what's changed. If you look at, you start with the first, so it's Reagan, Bush, Bush. Who else is
Trump.
what's the other Republican?
Reagan, no, it's Reagan, Bush, Bush, Trump, and before Reagan, it was Nixon.
Nixon. So you start with Nixon. So
Right.
starting with Nixon, nothing they did was so egregious and so willful as what we're experiencing now.
Well, yeah, and so that's where also people got to go back and do their own research on, just even Nixon himself was a backlash to the civil rights,
That's
um,
correct. That's right.
and in that whole era. So that we've been faced with that backlash ever since then. And if you look at the Republican nature, and this is why I'm always like just incredulous about anybody who would sit there and continue to try to say that, oh, the Democrats are what the problem is, particularly for Black people, and not really look at the fact that we've had Nixon, Reagan, two Bushes, and Trump, five Republican presidents over that time period since we gained and earned civil rights, you know, to the point of now, compare that to Carter, one term, you know, Ford, you could kind of count again, one term.
Right.
Um, and I don't even remember whether Ford was actually a Republican or a Democrat.
No, Ford was a Republican.
Right,
Ford was,
right. So you throw Ford in there too. You got
that's right.
six Republican presidents, and you got Carter, Clinton, Obama, and then Biden. Four Democratic presidents, and anybody who is so ignorant to then say that it's the Democrats who are holding us back, and it's the Democrats who are consistently not putting policies in place to help us is so ridiculous.
Well,
And
I would
again, that's why it's important to know this document and to know how it's set up through. You also got to look at what the Congress and Mitch McConnell did to Obama when he was in office and didn't even
so
allow him any
Mitch McConnell
Supreme
and
Court
then
justice.
the guy before Mitch.
There's so many seminal points that I can refer to that are factual.
Right.
Even
So
going back to how the whole search for weapons of mass destruction under
oh,
Bush and the Privacy Act that got in place that got put in there too, where now all of our lives are under scrutiny. Like there's been
Oh,
so many things that have really changed the dynamic of this nation under Republican administrations that people really need to wake up and understand why it's important in these 2026 midterms to truly understand this document and understand how you do have the power to have a say and a change in how things are going and have been going. So I want to bring us to a close on just the last point. So any final points that you might have on that you want people to think about as they might come back and
well,
get with us again.
last thing I want to say, I want to push back on your Democratic uh, statement. The Democrats, since Clinton, have become corporate Democrats, so they have not effectively put forth policy that helps the broader electorate. They've put forth policy that is at some points performative and helpful, but broad policy. So even Obama, the Obamacare Act did not go as far as it could have, um, and it became a cash grab for the insurance companies. So it's been helpful and it's been valuable. Um, there was a lot left on the table. I think what I would say for our for listeners and viewers going forward, uh, you've got to engage in politics at the local level, so you can be better at the national level. And wherever you live, uh, find out what your district is, and make a list of all the people that represent you in your district, and then go to the federal level, which is your senator, congressman, um, and find out, do they support the things you're interested in, and figure out how to contact them and let them know your thoughts, that you support them, or you want to find someone to challenge them. Because if we don't engage in actual politics as an electorate, we're going to be left to the will of the lobbyists and the elites. And we get lucky most of the time with you know
We need
what is
more
it?
altruistic, wealthy elites to come out of the woodwork and start to take the leadership
We
roles
no,
that
we don't need. I think the people need to take control of this country uh, for what they want, because I think even if you're on the right, you want a stop sign on your corner.
no,
You
I get
want
it. I
you
get
want
it.
the
But
sewer.
you also need people in those rooms that can talk face to face with these oppressors and with these
Okay,
autocrats and with
I,
these wannabe dictators
right,
because those are the ones who are going to have their ear.
right, and I'm suggesting in opposition to what you're saying, I'm suggesting we need the entire body politic to speak, so their voice will be drowned out, because we are hoping for their philanthropy, and if their philanthropy helps 35 people and the other 10,000 people starve, because that's what happens. They say, we're gonna, whatever the philanthropy that they're offering to the culture, it helps a subscribed group of people that they've identified. It doesn't help everyone. And what we need is a government that will step in and help every single one of us for whatever it is we need. We need to run a business, we need help, we need understanding, we need justice. We need a government that steps in and helps everyone, not just the people deemed valuable or worthy of help. And wealth in America is used as a tool to help those that they believe are deserving, and anyone that needs help deserves help.
But is that notion possible in a system of capitalism?
That that's this that notion is very possible, because if everyone is bringing to bear on the system what they need and want, capitalism will have a really hard time existing.
Well, but again, like that's the current financial system that we're all
Yeah,
working
and
under.
capitalism is not the end all and be all, and we can go past capitalism if every If 90% of the American populace coalesced and brought forth their concerns and their legitimate concerns and grievances, capitalism would find itself in a very dark, cold, and lonely place.
So there y'all have it from the ultimate activist. He's trying to encourage y'all to get out there and become 90% activated so that y'all can go out there and make these changes, people. So stay with us, keep coming back with us, and join us again for our next episode of the Constitutional Crisis Podcast.